I want to welcome this outstanding group of leaders who are presenting on this panel. Thank you all for your important work and leadership and taking time with us today. We are starting the first panel of the Assembly with No Greenwashing, Rejecting False Solutions to the Climate Crisis, because it's vital that we're clear about corporate and government climate plans that are false schemes that distract from the real solutions that actually work ecologically and uplift justice and equity. We need to understand that misdirection being advanced by neoliberal capitalism and colonization that serve the needs of the biggest polluters instead of helping people and planet. So we have to have a real clear understanding, which is why we're starting the Assembly this way. It's important to have a critical lens to examine a complex technocratic field of climate change policy and strategies from the local to the global arenas. By understanding the landscape of false solutions, we can work to dismantle the barriers to building a just transition and a livable future for all. And so with that, I'm very honored to introduce these expert panelists so that we can really hear in more detail what it is that we're talking about when we talk about false solutions and greenwashing. I'll be introducing them in the order that they're speaking. We'll be hearing from Silvia Ribeiro. She's a journalist, feminist, and environmental activist from Uruguay. Then we'll be hearing from Rita Uwaka, Environmental Rights Action Coordinator, Forest and Biodiversity Program, Friends of the Earth, Africa, from Nigeria. Then we'll hear from Clara Vondrich, Senior Policy Counsel, Public Citizens Climate Program and Public Voices Fellow with the OpEd Project, Yale Program on Climate Change Communications from the US. Hwei Mian Lim, Independent Consultant and Code Lead for Article 6 on the Paris Agreement, False Solutions and Dangerous Distractions, from the Women and Gender Constituency. She is from Malaysia. And then we'll be hearing from Ele Ravna Nak-a-Davi. She is a Sami leader. She's the chair of the Sami Parliament's Youth Council from Norway. And then we will be hearing from Simone Lavera Bilderbeek, independent academic research, and she's from the Netherlands. As we hand off the floor to our first speaker, Silvia, we will also be putting into the chat a report that WECAN has put out called The Need for Real Zero, Not Net Zero, Shifting from False Solutions to Real Solutions and a Just Transition. So it's another way that you can be more informed about what we're talking about regarding why we need to be aware of false solutions, and that will be in the chat for you. And with that, I hand the floor over to you, Silvia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Osprey. Hi, all friends and all the women that I may have met or not, but I'm really happy to be here and honored. And I thank you for doing this effort to get us to understand some of the things that are very important and going on. And well, I would like to say first to remind all of us that, during 28 Conference of the Parties of the Climate Convention, they have basically not mentioned fossil fuels. And that is it's incredible because, fossil fuels are the basis of the contamination, the emission of greenhouse gases. So in COP28, they mention and they say something like transitioning away from fossil fuels. But in reality, that was a poisoned pill because it wasn't really transitioning away. It was about unabated fossil fuels. That is what they say that they said back then. And unabated is all that hasn't been compensated by markets or offset by carbon markets and others, or in a way compensated by different technologies, particularly geoengineering technologies, ways of removing carbon from the atmosphere. And all of these are new business for the same actors that were the main causers of the climate change. So in COP29, that proceed to instrumentalize this, and they approved a new frame for carbon markets with Article 6 by allowing, for instance, opening for allowing carbon markets not only in soils, not only in forests, but also in the seas, in oceans. And the way of doing this is particularly through technology. So I wanted to mention for you some of these false solutions. I'm really very honored, not only with the other people in this panel, the dear women in this panel, but also in the other panels that following during this week. And I know we all will be completing the different pictures we need. So I will focus to give you some examples on what are these really dangerous technologies that they are proposing that are geoengineering, the manipulation of climate, and it's on land, on the seas, on marine systems, but also what we call solar geoengineering in the atmosphere. So the one that is most known is one that industry has created many decades ago, the oil industry, which is carbon capture and storage. And this technology was before called enhanced oil recovery. And it says much more about what this is about. This is a technology that the oil industry invented to extract deep oil reserves. So it's injecting carbon dioxide in the ground, for instance, in depleted oil wells, and taking out more oil. They have this technology for a long time, decades in fact, but they haven't been using it much because it wasn't economically viable. But now, by presenting it as a climate technology, because it's injecting carbon dioxide in the soil, then in the soil or in the sea, and then they call it climate technology, and they are claiming carbon credits. They are also getting a lot of subsidies, public subsidies. Today, there are around, this is their official, the industry official figures, there are around 40 such installations in operation, and all of them, or more than 90% of them, is about enhanced oil recovery, but they are subsidized in different way. The other part is also heavily subsidized. It's in Canada and Norway, and it has been a lot of subsidies from the states, from public money. So that means that instead of putting the money in real solutions, they are investing again in subsidizing the main culprits of climate change. I am, of course, not laughing. It's just that it's so ironic. This is the way. The other new technologies they are using are, for instance, to how to convert the whole marine ecosystem everywhere on a giant carbon sink. And they want to do this by manipulating the chemistry of the ocean, by, for instance, ocean fertilization. This is another geoengineering technology, or what they call enhanced oil recovery. And this what they call enhanced alkalinity in the ocean. And for doing that, they want, for instance, one of the technologies to add tons and tons of grounded minerals. That is to make the ocean more alkaline. This would multiply the impacts of mining many times. But also it will mess with the chemistry of the ocean, with the ecosystem in the ocean, and it will cause a lot of things that they don't know anything about. There are already over 40 experiments trying to do either this or adding other kind of marine geoengineering. They are selling credits in the voluntary market without having any single demonstration that this is really absorbing more carbon. I want to mention another marine geoengineering technology, which is giant farming of algae. And this is promoted as something that is very nice. You know, we all like algae in the seas, but this is about hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of monoculture of algae. This will have so many impacts in the sea because it's like these tree monocultures putting in the sea. This will have on the marine food chain, but also on the deep sea and many other impacts. And because none of this goes to the root causes of climate change will continue, emissions will continue, and because of that, this is a new business, and they really want to advance it through carbon markets. I will leave this here, but I want to point to you some where you can go to get more information on the techniques, on the impacts of geoengineering. One is geoengineeringmonitor.org, and the other one is the handsofmother-earth.org, which is an international alliance against geoengineering. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really important work you're doing, Silvia. Silvia's been working on this for years and years and is such an incredible expert on fall solutions. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd love to invite Rita Uwaka to please join us. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Osprey and everyone.
Oops, we've lost your video.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Hi.
Awesome.
Nice to be here. Good day, everyone, from wherever you are in the world. This is such an interesting topic, and it's something that is very close to our hearts, especially as environmental justice activists from Africa who has been campaigning against false solutions and different greenwashing techniques that is fueling climate crisis, fueling biodiversity crisis, and care crisis across different territories in Africa and around the world. Today, my presentation is going to be centered around, how greenwashing is impacting, the climate crisis. And we know that no greenwashing is something that we are speaking against, rejecting for solution to the climate crisis. It's a key area of work that we'll continue to speak on. The point is, how green is greenwashing? We talk about greenwashing and the impact it's having on ecological justice, on climate justice, on environmental and social justice. It's more of a sheep in wolf's clothing. It's all about, diverting attention from climate injustice that is flourishing in different territories around the world. It's all about environmental harms. It's all about fossil fuel industries, injustices, pollution. It's all about agro-commodities businesses expansion in different territories. It's all about that.
Uh-oh. I'm not sure what happened right there. I'm sure that Rita will be joining us again. She must have lost connectivity. So I think we're going to move to our next speaker. Clara, if you're available to jump in, we'll go ahead and then we'll come back to Rita when she joins us. Thank you for your flexibility. Let's go ahead and hear from Clara Vondrich. Thank you, Clara.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you. And it's funny, Rita and I were on the same wavelength because I was going to talk about greenwashing as the wolf in sheep's clothing, or better yet, the oil CEO in green clothing, right? I love what Silvia said. The same oil barons and powers who created the oil industry are now pushing these false solutions like CCS, geoengineering, and nuclear, I would add. Many, carbon neutral folks are, cautiously optimistic about nuclear, but we know from the research and just the practical experience of countries around the world that it's vastly more expensive than public coffers can support, and the timeframes are ridiculous. I mean, to build one nuclear reactor can take more than 20 years, and these projects are always facing delays and cost overruns. And so I actually think, in addition to being false solutions, they themselves are a form of greenwashing, because the powers that be know that these technologies aren't ready for prime time, and yet they push them anyway, creating a false sense of hope that allows them to burn oil for even longer. But I'd like to actually read a passage from Osprey's book because she has been such an inspiration to me. And if you haven't checked out The Stories in Our Bones, I would really recommend it. And I just play this game where I open a book at random and I read the passage in order to get some inspiration. So this is the one I got to today. When I consider the kind of human beings we in the dominant culture need to become to live in a post-colonial context and navigate the Anthropocene, I realize that our work is not only to support Indigenous-led efforts to revitalize and protect their languages, which is absolutely critical, but also to transform our own tongues into languages of belonging and kinship by learning to bend, circumvent, liberate, and stretch language that currently objectifies nature until we become speakers of languages that affirm a living universe. I mean, I have chills just reading that because the language we speak is so often the language of the oppressor and the language of the male-dominated energy that has set up the system that we live in. And we fall into the trap of using that language. And we just reinforce the system, even if we're critical of it, by using the same words and language and anger and fury, furious rhetoric. We're just reinforcing these systems. And for me, greenwashing ultimately is this idea that we can squeeze profit out of nature, that we can somehow, atone for our environmental sins by paying for a certificate of paper that says we're offsetting the emissions elsewhere. It's the ultimate Catholic indulgence, if you will. Back in the day, Catholics would cheat on their wives and, well, I guess not back in the day, it's happening still, but they could go to the Catholic Church and, before Martin Luther could purchase an indulgence and therefore they'd be clean in the eyes of God. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. And, I was coming up in, back in 2000 when BP was running its Beyond Petroleum campaign, and I fell for it. I thought that Lord, whoever his name was back in the day, the chairman of BP was sincere. And I fell into the trap that capitalism could contain the solution set to help our climate. 25 years later, I no longer believe that to be true. I believe that the current paradigm has to be remade, reimagined, much like Osprey writes in her book, because as Einstein said, the same thinking that created the problem can't get us out of it. I grew up desperately passionate to do something for climate. My first job out of college was working for Al Gore's presidential campaign because he was already talking about climate. He'd written a book. And I just recall being, told time and again that my ideas were kind of naive, and one concrete example was being on the BP Oil Spill Commission that Obama set up in 2010. And we had commissioners that were really established voices in the field, including the head of NRDC at the time. We also had some luminary professors from schools of public health and environment. We had the EPA administrator, former EPA administrator, who set up the first environmental justice office at the EPA. And I remember telling them all that this was a truly teachable moment, not only far beyond making sure spills like this didn't happen again, we could actually reimagine the Gulf economy, and they could use their bully pulpit in order to transition the Gulf economy to another, non-extractive form, whether it was the service industry or tourism or what have you. And they all looked at me with this condescending, little smirk, like, oh, Clara, that's such a nice idea, but that's not our mandate. Our mandate is to clean up this industry and make sure this doesn't happen again. And I remember feeling so small and so shut down, and that's another form of the patriarchy and frankly of greenwashing, is that, they make you believe that only incremental solutions are possible. The visions and the dreaming, they have no place in the current box. And I wish I'd had the circle of women and feminine energy, dominated energy that make up groups like this and that I blessedly have today in my community in order to give me that comfort that my intuition and what my heart said was valid, because I know it to be valid today, and I know that I have the confidence to speak about it. But the powers to make you feel insignificant and in fact silly were very powerful when I was growing up. So one lesson is just please surround yourselves by as many like-minded people as possible. And I also just want to stress that I really believe that male energy, or masculine energy isn't dangerous or detrimental per se. We always have in the dance of the pantheon, the feminine and male energies. We have the Shiva to the Shakti, we have the yin to the yang, we have the sun to the moon. And so the balance between them is what's missing today. You know, the balance and their ability to dance together is what's missing today. And just as a fun aside, I just had a baby daughter 6 weeks ago, and I named her Laska Shakti, because Shakti represents that divine feminine energy that I believe we so desperately need now. So I don't know where I am with time.
We're just there. We're at time, yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, I just wanted to say, yeah, pay-to-play climate policy is doomed to fail. Any system that degrades and denies the fundamental rights of nature is destined to fail. And we have the chance to stand up and say, we don't buy it anymore. We won't buy, the indulgences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clara, for that beautiful presentation. And just so you know, in the most positive way, when you started your presentation, we could hear your little one chirping back there in the background. So she's now part of the assembly as well. And really glad to welcome you as a new mama and your little one, which is who we're fighting for. So thank you for that and your powerful words. And thank you for all that you are doing. And with that, I'd like to see if we've got Rita back so she can finish her presentation. Ah, there you are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, as I was saying before the network struck, okay, the idea about greenwashing as a first solution has continued to bring more carbon market initiatives like RED, hydrogen fuels, industrial plantation expansion, geoengineering, and this is reinforcing social, environmental, and gender injustices across different territories. We are seeing carbon offset projects, exploiting more local communities, indigenous communities, women from the global south, and this is benefiting the polluters. The polluters are supposed to pay, but they are benefiting more, and these polluters are in the global north. We're seeing big polluters buy carbon credits as they continue to, continue their extraction projects and also profit from these extraction projects, from burning fossil fuels, from expanding agro-commodities in different community landscapes. And this has also fueled increased public crises in the biodiversity, care, and climate spaces. We're also seeing corporate capture of our resources, our forests, our water bodies, our land, our farmlands, and this is also being manifested in policy spaces. So corporate capture is not only capturing of resources. We are seeing it in policy spaces, for example, the COP negotiation spaces. The COP negotiations has been hijacked, has been co-opted and corrupted by corporations who are increasing every year in the negotiation space. This is something very worrisome, and the idea of the green washing as a first solution is also promoting green colonialism in the continent. When I say continent, I mean Africa, where there are lots of conservation projects. In the name of conservation, communities are being displaced from their ancestral lands, from their family farms, and also from forested landscapes that they have been custodian of in centuries and years. So companies are taking over these territories and impacting on the lives of communities, on the rights of community people, and fueling more land grabs, more deforestation, and this is, in a way, contributing to the climate crisis. There are core elements we should be looking at if we need the real solutions to be real and to counter the false solutions narratives that we have from corporations. It should be rooted in community knowledge. Indigenous knowledge is now an issue because a lot of indigenous knowledge have been eroded as a result of these false solutions, as a result of techno fixes that are not people-centered. We need to build our solutions as we've been promoting as environmental justice activists through agroecological means, promoting agroecological methods, promoting community forest-based management methods, where we put the management of our forests in the hands of the people. That will go a long way in mitigating against climate crisis. We must continue to name and shame these corporate polluters, these greenwashers at COP and other policy spaces. And also we must demand system change because the system is beyond repair as we speak. So there has to be concerted efforts for us to ensure that we continue to speak against, injustices, to promote system change and our climate change, and also the devastating impacts on women who continue to be the most impacted when, there is climate crisis, there's biodiversity loss, sharp and deepened inequalities at different levels has differentiated impact on women. We need gender justice, we need women's engagement in governance, and also the idea of this first solution that is rooted in market-based approach. We need to see how we can promote a non-market-based ecosystem approach to counter these false solutions that are continuing to cause flourishing injustices in different areas. We need collective solidarity, collective rights, amidst deepening inequalities and systemic injustices. Remember, we cannot be talking about environmental justice without climate justice. And we can't be talking about climate justice without women. So we need to build a collective solidarity, build people power, dismantle all patriarchal, tendencies that continue to fuel corporate capture of our resources, of our policy spaces, and undermine the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. Really appreciate your analysis and sharing your wisdom with us. And I'm really glad that you're able to get back online. And it's so important that we really understand, how the corporations have really captured a lot of the spaces that we need to claim back. And that's really what we're doing here. And with that, I would love to be able to hand the floor over to Hwei Mian Lim. You have the floor.
Thanks, Osprey. Greetings to everyone. As mentioned by previous speakers, it is very clear that carbon markets and carbon trading are false solutions aiming to distract countries from their responsibility to urgently reduce greenhouse gas emissions. My presentation will be on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. I will provide, first of all, an overview of what happened at COP29, followed by the issues with the operationalization of Article 6.4, followed by the potential of Article 6.8, and lastly, our demands. For overview of what happened at COP29, Article 6, first of all, consists of three siblings, I will call them. 6.2 is on bilateral carbon trading. 6.4 is on carbon markets, also known as Paris Agreement Crediting Mechanism. And 6.8 is on non-market approaches, known as NMA. At COP28 in Dubai in 2023, only the decision to operationalize 6.8 was adopted, 8 years after Paris Agreement. Countries couldn't reach consensus on the decisions to operationalize 6.2 and 6.4. So at COP29 in Baku it was not surprising that the COP president was under great pressure to operationalize 6.2 and 6.4. To cut the long story short, on the first day of COP29, the presidency gavelled Article 6.4 one-page decision without parties' negotiation and without detailed decision text agreed by parties. Now, let's look at the issues with Article 6.4. There are many issues with regard to the operationalization of 6.4. Here, I will focus on two issues that are important for us feminists. First, grievance mechanism. Carbon credits projects have negative impacts on women and girls. For example, their way of life, livelihoods, income, and health. It also increases their risk of gender-based violence, and this has been documented, and there has been whistleblower and incidents. Civil society have continuously emphasized that the grievance mechanism must be in place before 6.4 is operationalized. The grievance mechanism entered into force in May last year. However, the process is not user-friendly and it's only in English. A grievant or its authorized representative may submit a grievance through a dedicated interface on the UNFCCC website by completing a grievance form. As of today, 1 year later, there is still no dedicated interface on the UNFCCC website. Not having a user-friendly grievance mechanism is ethically wrong. With this current grievance mechanism, will it help to protect and defend local women and indigenous women's right to seek gender justice? The second issue, gender inclusion. The only time gender is in the agenda of the Article 6.4 meetings that happens few times a year was in early 2023. There's hardly any progress on gender in Article 6.4. If there's no gender consideration, will the promotion and protection of local women and indigenous women's rights be taken into consideration in all the carbon projects implemented under the Paris Agreement carbon market? Now, let's look at the potential of 6.8. Article 6 is not all bad. There is Article 6.8, which I've mentioned is on non-market approaches. However, it is least highlighted and often left behind compared to 6.2 and 6.4 on carbon trading and carbon markets. The good thing about 6.8 is non-market approach, NMA. And it's also more in line with the worldviews of indigenous people. It contributes to adaptation and resilience. It contributes to mitigation. It helps to achieve NDC commitments. It contributes to SDGs and social benefits. And compared to market approaches, NMA do not cause or cause minimal negative environmental, economic, and social impacts to the local communities and indigenous communities. Last week at the SB 62 session in Bonn, Latin American and Caribbean countries and island states highlighted that there's a lack of visibility and awareness on NMA. There's also lack of funding for NMA projects. These countries have proposed for the Green Climate Fund NMA financing. And these countries also call for the unlocking of NMA platform. They want the platform to be open for all. For your information, the NMA platform is designed to record and exchange information on NMA initiatives. Currently, the platform only allows parties to register their initiatives. The platform was launched in November last year. Until today, there's only 2 entries of NMA initiatives by parties. This shows that the platform is very underutilized. You can visit it, just Google NMA platform. Lastly, demands. For path to COP30 and beyond, here are the demands feminist organizations and like-minded organizations could put forward to their party and advocate at COP. For the Paris Agreement carbon market 6.4, continue advocating against carbon market. Second, demand for a working and user-friendly grievance mechanism. And third, integrate the upcoming new Gender Action Plan into Paris Agreement carbon market. For 6.8, NMA, number 1, amplify support for NMA and advocate for funding for NMA program or projects from climate finance mechanism. Second, demand that NMA must not be linked to 6.2 and 6.4. And 3, NMA must not be allowed to use fossil-based technologies and must wean off REDD+. Fourth, integrate the upcoming new Gender Action Plan into NMA. And lastly, unlock the NMA platform, allow non-parties to register NMA activities or initiatives as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hwei, for that great presentation and really very informative. And I wanted to share with our audience that throughout the next 6 days, we're going to be hearing from advocates all over the world who have different levels of expertise in many different arenas. And we wanted directly to bring in leadership who has expertise on the actual COP negotiations as Hwei. And we've worked together on Article 6 over the years. And we want to also sort of demystify what's happening inside the climate negotiations by bringing some of that information into this space, because we're all like an ecosystem working together to talk about these issues. What I would also suggest, as I mentioned before, and we'll put into the chat again, a report that WECAN put out called The Need for Real Zero, Not Net Zero, because it will also help you with finding some other resources, not just this article, but will help explain in more detail a lot of things that are being discussed here, because I can't stress enough how important it is that we understand what these false solutions are, what market-based mechanisms are, what we're talking about, because so often when we are hearing in the mainstream media is about these quote unquote solutions that governments and financial institutions are putting forward that are not real solutions, but they fall into the realm of continuing imperialism, capitalism, and the structures we don't want. So we are talking today about systemic change, and it requires analyzing these policies and understanding where they're real and where they're not lifting up climate justice, and how they actually perpetuate us continuing to burn the planet and harm communities. So all of this is critical to understand, and that's why we're having these different presentations, but also knowing people are coming into these dialogues at many different levels. So I would also suggest these resources that are put into the chat from Clara, from Hwei, from Rita. We're sharing more about these speakers so that you can go back and also learn more as we all catch up and learn this language, as Clara pointed out. And with that, I want us to hear a presentation from an Indigenous perspective from LA. And we can go ahead and hear from her now.
Thank you. And thank you, Osprey and WECAN for organizing this panel and for inviting me to speak beside these other amazing women. My name is Elra Nanakelervi, and I'm a 24-year-old Sami activist. I would like to start off by saying that evidently there is no just transition in my region, Sami, only more business as usual. Switch slides, please. As you see on this map, we have 4 states to deal with at once, even though much of our struggle is cross-border, and our region, the Arctic, is the fastest warming region in the world. Using 2 examples, I will try to show how the so-called green transition affects my people and how we currently are dealing with it. In both of them, the principles of free, prior, and informed consent are violated. Next slide. The copper mining company Nussir ASA was granted permission to start the mining project and to dump waste in the fjord, Riappuvuotna, as part of the so-called green transition. The mountain area in question is also important Sami reindeer grazing land. Next slide. We have fought this project for 12 years, and in 2021, we established a protest camp with environmental NGOs after a decade of political resistance. Legal challenges revealed procedural errors, which temporarily halted the work. Recently, though, Nussir was bought by Canadian company Blue Moon Metals, enabling them to restart operations. 2 weeks ago, they began blasting without warning, but indigenous and environmental activists quickly stopped them. Although they managed to halt the work initially, police were called just this morning and forcibly removed the protesters. So the resistance continues. And this is one of the most urgent cases in Sápmi. We are mobilizing local support and raising global awareness, reaching out to investors to highlight the devastating risks this mine poses to our people and the environment. So if you want to keep yourself updated on this case, please follow the Instagram accounts below. Next slide, please. In 2021, the Samis of Fosen won in the Norwegian Supreme Court, stating that the wind turbines on their reindeer herding land violate their human rights. So wind power is thrown in there as the solution to save the world, and with the slogan, more, faster. The problem with wind turbines is icing, avoidance from animals because of noise, pollution, additional infrastructure, etc. So in reality, the wind turbines and reindeer herding cannot coexist. Even though the Samis won the case, the Norwegian state was reluctant to respect the outcome of the Supreme Court verdict. For the following 500 days, the wind turbines kept spinning and no political action moved the case in any way. Next slide. This resulted in Sami and Norwegian environmental youth to take action by occupying the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy. We were inside the ministry for the whole weekend until getting arrested by the police in the middle of the night of the 4th day. Next slide. So this sparked the biggest Sami civil disobedience protest since the Alta case in the late 70s. We shut down the Norwegian government for a week, forced the Prime Minister to the table to negotiate, to admit the ongoing human rights violation, and apologize to the reindeer herders. So this is how far we had to go in order for the Norwegian government to listen. And what was Norway's solution? To force the reindeer herders to a mediation process to mediate themselves out of a human rights violation. So they're now looking for supplementary grazing lands for the reindeer. And spoiler alert, there isn't any. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And this whole case reveals how asymmetric power relations continue to pave the way for colonial dispossession of Sami land, and also human rights in this so-called green energy transition. And there are so many more similar cases as the Fosen case already built and in the process. Next slide, please. So we refused to pay the fines received, and we state that we are not the real criminals here. Our resistance was the reason the Fosen case saw any movement at all. We were taken to court and we got acquitted twice. The government kept appealing, and last Thursday we were in the Supreme Court of Norway, and our verdict is expected within a few weeks. Last slide, please. So these are just a couple of examples of violations of both national legislation and human rights law, among many similar examples all over Sápmi. Sami culture is framed as a danger to the land, so the governments force our people to slaughter their reindeer, stating that there are too many reindeer in relation to the environmental capacity of the land. At the same time, they are on a highway to total destruction of the lands and waters in that same area. The green shift is very much a game of smoke and mirrors and greenwashing of the good old extractive capitalistic greed. The so-called solution to transitions are not just false, but they're contributing to accelerating pollution, loss of biodiversity, and loss of land, and by that, our culture. The common thing with all of these cases is that the governments and the companies ignore proper process, FPIC, the UNDRIP, the ILO Convention 169, recommendations from UN bodies, and even their own laws in the name of the green shift. But This is a dangerous development, not only in the Nordic states, but also for the rest of the world. When the ones who were once considered benchmarks of like how to respect and uphold indigenous peoples and human rights are now throwing everything overboard, then it could result in the legitimation of such violations and pave the way for this free-for-all. But we will keep fighting. The only meaningful way forward has to be real, just transition where indigenous peoples and human rights are respected. We should not have to occupy ministries, tie ourselves to heavy machines, or take every single issue through the court system. It's as easy and as hard as that. So we will keep leaving the land as we find it. We will keep asking for permission from the land and the ones already there before we enter. And we will keep thanking the land for all that we receive. That is our obligation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ele, for your incredible work. And, you know, we just all applaud your incredible courage, your resilience and resistance effort. And it's just so meaningful to all of us to hear your work and how important it is that we continue to center frontline communities, Indigenous leadership. And this is why, you know, you are listening to the land and you are showing us the way. And I wish you all of the best. I know everyone here does. And really, truly, thank you for your courage and leadership. You know, this is the result of colonization over so many years. And thank you for your resistance and resilience. And with that, I would like to hand over the floor to Simone. Simone, take us away.
Yeah, thank you very much. If you can put up the slides, that would be great. I've worked a lot in international processes, but I will actually talk about energy transition in my hometown, Amsterdam. I decided last year to work on the local level, as I think processes like UNFCCC are actually fundamentally flawed. Moreover, I've seen the devastating, often gendered impacts of aviation. Also in my hometown in Amsterdam, people are literally getting sick of the noise. And it's a huge source of greenhouse gases. It's actually also an obstacle. Aviation is also a major obstacle to renewable energy in the area around Amsterdam. So it was one of the reasons I decided to stay local and fly as little as possible. And I would like to congratulate organizers of this fantastic digital event. I think it's really an example of how we can still all come together, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces in this. So this is my neighbor. It's called Ketjen. It's Albermade. And it's a typical example of the greenwashing that was talked earlier about. It's actually one of the 10 biggest polluters of Amsterdam. But at the same time, if you pass by the gate, you will see placards where they claim to be a huge contribution to sustainability because they produce catalyzers for cars, and that makes the cars a little bit cleaner. Anyhow, this is in the east of the harbor where I live. My work partly focuses on the active western part, the port of Amsterdam. Next slide, please. Now, Amsterdam and the port of Amsterdam have very huge ambitions. I think there's also a positive story here, because I really realize that if I see the discourse now, where they are at the stage of the UNFCCC negotiations, which are still trying to follow online, you just see that a city like Amsterdam is just much more advanced. I mean, they definitely want to become carbon neutral by 2050. But it's also very clear that transitioning away from fossil fuels is already a done deal in Amsterdam. I mean, as of 2008, there's already been no expansion of fossil fuel unlading in the harbor. They now have just published a new vision. As of 2030, all coal unloading will be phased out of the harbor. There will be no coal anymore in the harbor. This Hess thing that you see on the left side, that's actually one of the former coal plants. So it will completely stop using coal. There's a huge promotion of wind energy, electrification of industries. All the other fossil fuels are also being phased out. There's promotion of circular industries, several big zones, reuse of plastic, etc. There's also promotion of bioenergy and the bioeconomy in general, which sadly is still seen as positive. I'll get to more of that later. Next slide, please. So I should say that the wind, you saw a lot of windmills also. There's the wind energy expansion is one of the things that's been hampered by the airport, because the most efficient windmills are actually so high that they hamper the flights of the airport, which is just far too close to the city. And the airport has also just ordered the close down of a huge solar field because they are being blinded by the light reflection from the solar field. So you see that there's actually a huge conflict also between aviation and some of the renewable energy strategies they have here. On the other hand, I think I would support, I was impressed by Ella's story about the windmills. We have a bit of the same thing here in Amsterdam on a very small scale, because they're desperately looking for alternative places for these windmills. And typically one of the priority locations is in one of the most marginalized neighborhoods of Amsterdam, because there people are not bothered by windmills. So all that is going all over the world. Anyhow, this is the good story insofar that these are former oil tankers. They're still being used for also old storage facilities. In 10 years from now, these will no longer be used for oil. They will be used for hydrogen and biofuels, because they're mainly used as fuels for aviation, for Schiphol. And the big alternatives they are promoting in Amsterdam are hydrogen and biofuels. And to complement all the fantastic stories just told, I wanted to go a little bit more deeper into these two fall solutions. Next one, please. So hydrogen, I've actually learned a lot about that last year. It's quite fascinating because you see a huge push in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands for hydrogen. It's considered the big, great solution for the future. However, at this moment, globally, 97% of all hydrogen is still gray. It's made by fossil fuels, which means it actually worse for the climate than fossil fuels itself. And in the Netherlands, only 0.03% is actually green, so produced by green energy. But even green hydrogen has often devastating gendered impacts on communities in for example, also the production countries, because they're also importing green hydrogen. There was impressive stories. I'll leave it to people there to describe them more. But here also there's a lot of land grabbing for these huge energy projects. Hydrogen also requires massive amounts of water and electricity. And that contributes to water shortages, which is actually a huge problem now with climate change. It's one of the climate change impacts that the Netherlands faces is actually water shortages, causing also siltation, drink water problems, etc. And net congestion. Now, the net congestion is actually a huge problem, partly caused by data centers and artificial intelligence, because half of all the electricity is already going in Amsterdam is already going to data centers. And because of that, they've just declared code red in Amsterdam. So there's now no new space for big electricity connections until around 32 or 35, 2035, and in the entire province of the Netherlands, North Holland actually. And that while for a lot of industries, they see the main transition they can take is to switch from sorry, natural gas to green electricity, so wind or solar electricity. Sorry, I've got a cold, so I need to drink. And just another problem that you have with hydrogen is that there's a lot of leakage from the pipes. And that's often seldom talked about, but there's actually a recent research that was just presented to me last week says that 2 to 5% of all hydrogen is just leaking through the pipes. I mean, this is the smallest molecule. Now, hydrogen is not considered a greenhouse gas, but it's even seen as a renewable source of energy in the EU. But it has an estimated global warming effect that's 11 times bigger than CO2. And that is on the one hand, because it delays the dissolution of methane. And as people know, methane, as also saw it in the chat, methane is actually the most powerful greenhouse gas you have. That's why meat stays at the heart of the problem. It stimulates the creation of clouds, which is also contribute to the warming effects, and it affects the ozone layer. So this is actually a huge effect, and it's very hard to combat with technical means. Next slide. So you see, hydrogen is actually not really helping as a solution. Bioenergy is even more devastating. Bioenergy consumption is, and I used to work a lot in this. I'm actually still a very enthusiastic member of the Biomass Action Network. Bioenergy is actually the world's most rapidly growing and false solution. There's an expansion of 250% expected in bioenergy in the coming 10 years. Next slide. This will have devastating impacts on forests. It is already having devastating impacts on forests. European forest biomass is declining, causing huge, CO2 emissions as well. There's forest degradation happening all over the place, and there's deforestation happening all over the place. But the most devastating impact is actually the replacement of forest, but also other natural ecosystems by monoculture tree plantations. And you see that in the Netherlands, you see that in other places. And it also means that a lot of areas that could be restored into nature will no longer be restored. And it's a basic, assumption that trees will grow, but also the time scale it takes to grow trees is just far too long. So already bioenergy is actually causing much more emissions than even coal. It's a worse solution. Next slide, please. A lot of these impacts are gendered, and I'm just astonished to see that also local policies, when they talk about these false solutions like hydrogen and biofuels, there's just no attention for the gender impact. Bioenergy, both biofuels like soy, which is one of the big sources they're now considering here in Amsterdam for the aviation, and wood-based bioenergy has huge gendered impacts. These are plantations in Brazil. The communities there, especially the women, are suffering from breast cancer because of the agrochemicals. They're suffering from glaucoma. They are suffering from a lot of gender-based violence. And this is a huge social impact that they have. These people have lost their water, they've lost their land, they've lost their ecosystems. So to go to the last slide, because I know we are running out of time, and you can find a lot more of the information about this impacts on EPN Biomass Action Network. They just published a big global threat map. I really recommend you to read that. It's a wonderful document. So my key message here is that global warming is not just about CO2, and it's not just about fossil fuels. And I'm sometimes worried that we've put far too much emphasis on just fossil fuels and just CO2. Of course, we don't want that either. But there are false solutions that are even more devastating for the planet. And we see all over the world now how these alternative solutions are actually causing more global warming, more social harm, and more impacts on women in all their diversity. So let's please broaden up the debate and talk about all greenhouse gases, talk about real just transitions instead of just an energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simone, for all of that incredible work that you're doing in research. And we will be putting those resources and Simone's information into the chat so people can learn more. Thank you so much for your incredible work for years on these topics. We only have a few minutes left in the session, but I did want to go back to all the speakers. And literally, if people could just give like a 1-minute closing remark, I would love to hear from all of you about just your main message you want folks to hear from you today. And like I said, we're short on time, but it's really important now that you've heard one another to give everyone an opportunity to just chime in again. So if we could go ahead and go back to our first speaker. I'm just making sure everybody's still here. Silvia's here. Great. Please go ahead, Silvia.
Yeah, thank you, Osprey. I think it is, well, my main message is we are in problems for sure. And it's very important that we don't get tricked by all these promises of things that will not happen, like Simone just said. The good thing, and I want to end on that note, is that we have so many alternatives. I'm sure that among the participants in this conference, but also many other communities, particularly indigenous peoples, peasants, and others, we really have a lot of alternatives, and we need to strengthen them too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Silvia. And we'll go to Clara.
I just want to close with this idea that your voice matters, and you're much more powerful than you think. And don't let, you know, and again, it's not just men, but it's the male energy, sort of cow you into feeling that your ideas and visions are not feasible or possible. And surround yourself with as many like-minded people as you can. But when it comes to practical application of these ideas, I think it's really important also to get engaged in your local communities, run for office, make sure that you are being active and you know, sharing your ideas as much as possible. I really, once Laska's maybe a little bit older, maybe I'll run for local town council or something, because ideas are important and they need to be shared far and wide. So thank you again for this opportunity. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate, and we love seeing your little one. Looks like they're just getting up from a nap there. She's stretching out. And we'll go to Rita. My apologies, Rita. I got mixed up because we moved you and Clara with the video issue. So Rita, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. We need to build collective people power, because that's the only way we can dismantle the systems of oppression that is all around us, the corporate capture of our resources, of our policy spaces. We need to find a way to build a collective solidarity at different levels, from local to global. And it's part of what we are doing here, and WECAN is doing great on that. So we need to find a way to strengthen all of that. We also need to promote solutions that is right-based and not market-driven, like water polluters are all geared towards, you know, making money for private pockets, not concerned about the rights of people, not concerned about ecological justice, or, you know, concerned about how to make the world better. It's all about profit-driven approaches at the detriment of our environment, of indigenous peoples and local communities, with women bearing the most of the brunt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. So glad you could join us. Hwei, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, like other speakers have said, you know, we cannot do it alone. We have to be a collective movement to do this together. And we are many of us, and we are powerful. And as we have said again and again at the Women and Gender Justice meetings all the time, no gender justice with no climate justice without gender justice. And women, we are resourceful, we have the leadership, and we know what are the real solutions. Keep on pushing for non-market approaches, non-market solutions. There are plenty out there, especially done by indigenous women and local communities. We need to highlight them. We need to bring them up to international level, because it has not been featured, it has not been hyped up. And you know how corporate capture does all the all the hyping up of carbon markets and carbon trading, and they have drowned all the real solution. So we need to do something to hype up non-market approaches. Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Thank you, Hwei, and I love that. We definitely, one of the big things we're doing this week is bringing forward all those solutions that are community-led, are from indigenous peoples, are women-led solutions that we've been seeing, that are what we need to be doing. So I'm really glad that you brought that forward, because we know what to do. We just need to get a lot of interference out of our way so we can move forward. Ele, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say to the women, patriarchy, leading with softness, care, and not violence and force. Thank you. That's what we need. And I wanted to highlight the importance of people's allies, and that indigenous peoples truly need to be in the rooms decisions are made. We need to think about environment, biodiversity, and climate at the same time. So respect indigenous rights, respect human rights. The green energy transition cannot come at the cost of indigenous lives.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing our attention to the fact that indigenous rights, which we'll be getting into a lot this week, are important for all of us to protect. Thank you so much, Ele, for your work. And I give the final just 30 seconds to Simone. It's yours, Simone. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I totally agree with Silvia and others that there are alternatives. Actually, I wanted to end with a very hopeful message then. Here in my neighborhood, there's wonderful examples of alternatives to market-based consumerism. For example, they're having a giveaway shop every month, which is organized by the neighborhood center, where people can just come and bring their things that they don't need anymore, and other people can come and just take it without any money involved. And actually, there's already several neighborhood centers who are having this kind of giveaway initiatives, and it's a perfect way to recycle your things and go around markets.
I love that. Thank you, Simone. And that's it. I mean, I also think it's really great to bring these things and the solutions close to the ground. A lot of things that we need to do are things that are simple that we can do in our own communities. And I think once we stop looking at these top-down structures where they're corporate controlled and people are trying to make money and keeping things within corporate marketplaces, we're going to do so much better. And we already are enacting these things, and women are leading the way. So I love all of these presentations. Thank you all so much for your time. It's been a really powerful panel, and hope to see you all soon.